Beneath the icy mountains, shrouded in a thick swirling mist, lay a newly established princely town. Right on its very edge stood a small yet exquisitely elegant palace. From the palace's ornate balconies, every single morning, a delightful fragrance would ascend, laden with the rich, comforting aroma of freshly baked wheat bread, tender, soft buns, and sweet, small honey cakes. All of this was lovingly prepared by Princess Rohina's own hands. Rohina possessed a gentle and compassionate heart. Though a golden crown adorned her head, the flower on her hands, and the faint dusting of white upon it made her appear humble and approachable, just like any common girl. Rohina's father, King Shahryar, and her mother, Queen Mahersha, had vanished on a distant journey. Now the palace's silence was broken only by the crackling of Rohina's tandoor and the chirping of birds. Rohina would wake up every morning before sunrise, knead the dough, mix milk, butter, and honey. Then she would place beautiful flatbreads on a small tray and open the window of her tiny bakery in front of the palace. She would think perhaps today a traveler would come, a weary wayfarer or a hungry child. But often, the days would remain quite desolate and quiet, the faint sound of snow melting on the distant mountains, the gentle rustling of the river flowing below, and Rohina, sitting all alone in the bakery, would only ever truly feel these things. One afternoon, as a soft pale blue light drifted across the sky, and the sweet smell of rain filled the air, the small wooden bell of the bakery chimed. The door slowly creaked open, and a very frail, exhausted old woman stepped inside. Nobody knew her name. People called her Zara Amma from afar. She herself never revealed her own name. Her clothes were old, her feet were bare, and her hands were trembling. But there was a strange depth in her eyes. As if centuries of stories lay hidden, Zahra Amma, strolling, approached Rohina and hesitating said, "Daughter, even today I have no coins, but my stomach is empty." A soft light seemed to ignite in Rohina's heart. She immediately, smiling, picked up a soft, warm roti. She spread a little butter on it, wrapped it in paper, and placed it in Zahra Amma's hands. "Food is always ready for you. Don't you worry about money." A gentle gratitude spread across Zahra Amma's wrinkled face. She then softly said, "May Allah always keep your heart kind and tender, my dear daughter Rohina." After that, she slowly made her way outside. For several days following, Zahra Amma continued to visit the bakery daily. She would always come empty-handed but hungry, and Rohina would happily give her bread every single day. Sometimes she would also provide milk with it. But with the passing of time, a faint unease and suspicion began to grow in Rohina's heart. She would often think, is she truly hungry, or does she perhaps eat and drink somewhere else before arriving? And what about me? Why am I the one exhausted doing all of this every single day? These thoughts began to swirl in Rohina's heart, like hidden snakes silently crawling. Even though she wished, she could no longer feel the same cheerfulness as before. Now, whenever Zahra Amma visited the bakery, Rohina would smile less and rarely make eye contact. She still gave bread, but a heavy cloud remained in her heart. One day, light raindrops were falling on the mountains. The bakery was completely silent. Only the oven was burning. Rohina sat down with the bowl of flour in front of her, but her gaze was elsewhere. Anger was rising in her heart. It was as if someone had suddenly thrown a spark into hidden ashes. Rohina thought, enough is enough now. This is beyond all endurance. She began to knead the dough, but this time, instead of love, her hands were stiff with anger. Then her gaze fell upon a small bottled poisonous solution near the oven, which had once been kept for rats. Rohina mixed the poison into the flour. Her heart was trembling within, but anger compelled her to do it. She only thought, this must all end today. Around evening, when Zahra Amma arrived at the bakery door, Rohina extended her hand and said loudly, "Here, Amma, bread for today. There's no time." Zahra Amma, holding the bread, slowly began to walk towards the forest. Raindrops were still falling and the path's mud was wet and slippery. Deep within the jungle, a young girl, Liana, was crossing a lonely path for the first time. She carried a bundle of wood upon her shoulder, with a slight hesitation in her heart. But a dangerous wild animal, Brank, was lurking in the jungle. His brown eyes held hunger and anger. He suddenly pounced towards Liana. The girl trembled with fear. The wood fell from her hands and she backed away, pressing against a tree. Then Zahra Amma witnessed these distressing scenes. Even though she herself was feeling quite weak and utterly exhausted, yet her heart was overflowing with an incredible inner strength and courage. She immediately cast her sharp gaze all around her surroundings. She picked up a large stone and hurled it towards Brank. The rock struck Brank squarely on the head. He shrieked, stumbled back in utter panic, and then finally fled into the deep dark shadows of the jungle. Liana slowly sank down onto the ground. Her breathing was ragged and fast, with tears of sheer terror welling up in her eyes. Her heart was pounding furiously in her chest. Zahra Amma came closer to her, gently stroked her head, lightly patted her back, and softly said, "My dear child, you've been very frightened, but everything is fine now." Then Zahra Amma opened her small bag and took out the very same bread that Rohina had given. "My dear, you're scared. Here, eat this. I will feel alive again." Liana held the piece of bread in her hands, her eyes filled with tears of profound gratitude. She had barely broken off a single mouthful when she suddenly heard the sound of her mother's voice. Overwhelmed with happiness and a feeling of deep, calming relief, she ran straight to her mother. Zara Amma watched him disappear into the far distance. Then she slowly lifted her gaze towards the sky, as if she were engaged in a silent dialogue with someone, and then she set off upon an entirely different path. Princess Rohina sensed that something was seriously wrong. Her younger sister Liana was nowhere to be found within the palace walls. Rohina questioned the palace staff, but not a single person offered any information. Everyone simply shook their heads and chose to remain silent. It was as if they all knew something, but refused to reveal it. The fear in her heart continued to grow. Rohina began searching every single room in the palace. She ran across the courtyard, through the garden, past the pond, down every path, around every corner. She kept calling out everywhere, shouting, "Liana, Liana, where are you?" But the only answer that came back was the deep silence and the empty walls echoing. We looked inside every single room, through every long hallway and corridor, and behind every window. But there was no sign, no trace of Liana. Time continued to pass. Fatigue and deep distress cast heavy shadows upon Rohina's spirit. She finally collapsed onto the floor of the palace courtyard. Her head was clutched in both hands and her heart was pounding rapidly. Her breathing was becoming completely irregular. It was at this very moment that a faint red glow slowly began to appear in the air. The atmosphere grew soft and gentle. Time itself seemed to slow its pace. From the shimmering light, a red fairy named Avarella emerged. Her long hair swayed gracefully in the gentle breeze. Her eyes held the fiery redness of flames, yet also the anticipation of a soft, warm light. From her flowing garments, delicate streams of light cascaded, as if a wave of crimson radiance had descended from the heavens to touch the earth. Avarella looked at Rohina. On her face there was worry and sorrow, but along with it, an unconquerable tenderness also shone through. Avarella, in a soft but echoing voice, said, "Rohina, your sister Liana is still alive, but danger has drawn very near." Rohina's heart began to pound rapidly. Tears started flowing from her eyes. Her mind was filled with heavy questions. "Where is Liana now? Have I arrived too late?" The fairy slowly and softly waved her hand, and a transparent curtain materialized in the atmosphere. Liana became visible in that curtain, sitting beneath a tree at the jungle's edge. In her hand was the same bread Zara Amma had given her, and she was just about to take her very first bite. "Tasikipat mira paindi." Rohina let out a slight sharp cry. She instantly recognized that it was the loaf of bread she had poisoned in her anger and exhaustion. Avarella looked seriously and gravely toward Rohina. "The consequence of every single action always returns. Rohina, whether that action is good or evil. Your decision could now affect your most precious possession." Rohina fell to her knees on the ground. She placed both hands on her head and could only manage to say, I have made a terrible mistake." Rohina continued to weep uncontrollably. Tears streamed endlessly from her eyes, and her heart was burdened with immense sorrow. The red fairy Avarella then slowly and gently took a step forward. She caressed Rohina and softly said, "Rohina, please stop crying now. I will take you to your sister." The fairy waved her hand in the air, and in an instant, Rohina was transported to that part of the forest where her little sister Liana sat beneath a tree. Liana held the same poisonous bread that Rohina had prepared in anger and exhaustion. She was just about to eat it. Avarella waved her hand once more. The bread slowly, gently, lifted from Liana's hand, rising into the air. As soon as the bread went airborne, all the hidden poison began to emerge and dissipate as a dark black smoke. Rohina was experiencing a complex mix of both astonishment and fear. She then saw that the bread was now completely safe and perfectly clean. No harm had been done. Avarella spoke in a very gentle voice. "Look here, Rohina, the consequence of every single action always comes back to us. The decision you took in that moment of anger and exhaustion could have affected the most valuable thing in your life, your own sister." Rohina dropped down onto her knees, putting both hands upon her head, and cried out in despair. "I have done something terribly wrong. I promise I will never ever do this again." Pari gently placed her comforting hand upon Rohina's head, just as a loving mother rests her hand upon her sleeping child. A faint, sweet wave of perfume diffused throughout the atmosphere, like the warm, comforting scent of fresh baked bread after the melting of the winter snow. "Rohina, you have been granted a second chance, a new opportunity in life. Goodness must be performed with the heart, and never out of anger or resentment. If goodness ever becomes exhausted and gives up, the entire world will turn dark. Now, you must look at your bakery as a doorway, leading straight to the heart, and not just as a simple business establishment." Gradually, Aurella's crimson glow began to fade, and it rose up into the heavens above. Rohina decorated the bakery with much more affection and love than she had before. She commissioned the building of brand new ovens. She learned how to use the flour in a much more judicious and proper manner. She set aside a certain number of loaves of bread for selling. Others were carefully placed in a separate basket meant for the needy, and she hung a small wooden plaque right inside the bakery shop. "Here, kindness is distributed. The only currency here is need and love." Rohina continued to wait for Zara Amma, and sometimes at night, from the palace balcony, she would gaze at the stars and feel a faint smile and tenderness still lingering around the bakery. And so, Rohina's bakery was no longer just a place for bread. Here, every visitor received a warm feeling along with soft bread.
We were taught strict and silent lessons, lessons that truly touched our hearts. If you like this video, please like it and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you can keep getting such entertaining and fascinating stories.